In 2006, a man named Scott Routley was admitted to the hospital in Canada after a severe car accident. He was unresponsive, no eye tracking, no purposeful movement, no signs of awareness. For 12 years, the medical consensus was that nobody was home. Then, a neuroscientist named Adrian Owen put him in an fMRI scanner and asked him to imagine playing tennis. His brain lit up, not randomly, not like background noise, in exactly the regions that a healthy, conscious brain activates when it imagines playing tennis. Scott Routley, the man that his doctors believed was absent, was listening to every word. So here's the question. What exactly is a coma? And how did medicine spend decades completely misunderstanding it? Most people carry a fairly cinematic picture of what a coma looks like. You've seen it. Someone's in a hospital bed, perfectly still, eyes closed, maybe a machine breathing for them. They're unconscious, they're unreachable, and either they wake up one day, possibly with convenient amnesia, or they don't. The assumption baked into this image is brain and binary. You are either conscious or you're not. Either someone is there behind the eyes, or the lights are off and the building is empty. It's an intuitive model, and it turns out deeply wrong. Consciousness isn't a light switch, it's more like a dimmer, with a whole range of settings between fully on and fully off. Deep sleep is one setting, general anesthesia is another, dreaming is somewhere else entirely, and it turns out there are states in between wakefulness and nothing that medical science spent most of the 20th century either missing entirely or lumping together under the wrong label. The coma is not one thing, it's a territory, and the map we've been using has enormous blank spaces marked incorrectly with the word nothing. Let's start with what we actually know about how consciousness works, or at least what the leading models suggest. The brain, at its most basic, is a communications network. Billions of neurons passing signals, building patterns, creating loops of activity. Consciousness, as best as anyone can tell, isn't located in any one region. It's not sitting in the frontal lobe like a pilot in a cockpit. It seems to emerge from connectivity, from the brain's different regions talking to each other in a specific, organized way. Think of it like a symphony orchestra. What makes music isn't a single instrument, it's the coordination, the timing, the relationship between the parts. When the brain is conscious and alert, its regions communicate in rich, complex, constantly shifting patterns. When you fall into a dreamless sleep, that communication simplifies. Certain loops go quiet. When you go under general anesthesia, the coordination breaks down further. The instruments are still there, but they've stopped playing together. A coma is what happens when that coordination gets disrupted, not by chemical, but by damage to the brainstem, to the structures that maintain arousal, to the pathways that allow different regions to synchronize. The brain isn't off, it's disconnected. And that distinction matters enormously because a disconnected brain is not the same as an absent one. Here's where the history gets uncomfortable. For the most part of the 20th century, clinicians assess consciousness in the same way they always had, by looking for behavioral responses. Can the patient track a moving finger? Do they respond to pain? Can they follow a command? The problem is that some patients can't produce a response even when they're perfectly capable of processing one. The motor system, the machinery of movement and behavior can be damaged or disconnected from the rest of the brain while cognition continues functioning somewhere inside. This produced a diagnostic category that, in retrospect, was a catch all for things we didn't understand: the vegetative state. The name itself tells you what medicine assumed: vegetative, plant like, present biologically, absent in every meaningful sense. Tens of thousands of patients have been classified this way since the category was formalized in 1972. Adrian Owen's work starting in the early 2000s began to crack that open. His team discovered that by asking patients to imagine specific tasks, like playing tennis, which activates motor planning regions, or walking through their home, which activates spatial navigation regions. They could essentially create a yes or no communication system using brain activity alone. Imagine tennis for yes, imagine walking for no. In one landmark 2010 study published in the New England Journal of Medicine, they tested 54 patients diagnosed as vegetative or minimally conscious. Five of them showed clear, reliable responses. One of them, using only his thoughts from inside his body that hadn't moved meaningfully in years, was able to answer questions about his own life. He confirmed his father's name, and he said he wasn't in pain. He'd been classified as vegetative for 5 years. So, how many people in this situation are actually conscious? This is the part that's hard to sit with. A 2019 study from Columbia University found that roughly 15 to 20% of patients diagnosed as vegetative showed signs of covert awareness when tested with EEG based brain monitoring. They were categorized correctly by their behavior, but their brains told a different story. That's not a rounding error, that's a systematic miss. And here's the layer underneath that. Even patients who are genuinely unconscious in the deeper, more complete sense aren't necessarily blank. The brain doesn't go entirely dark at the threshold of awareness. Studies have shown that comatose patients retain some capacity to process auditory information. Familiar voices, family members, doctors show measurable neural responses in some patients that meaningless noise does not. The emotional salience of a voice, its familiarity, registers somewhere in the system even when nothing registers behaviorally. This is the basis for why medical staff are now increasingly advised to speak to comatose patients as though they can hear, not as a comforting ritual, but as a scientifically defensible precaution. The brain may be listening even when it can't answer. There's another phenomenon at the edge of all this that most people haven't heard of, and it reframes everything even further. Lucid, organized, detail conscious experience, including memory formation, has been documented in patients under conditions that should, by every prior model, make it impossible. The most rigorous case comes from cardiac arrest research. When the heart stops, blood flow to the brain ceases. Within 15 to 30 seconds, electrical activity flatlines. The brain, by every measurable standard, is off. And yet, a significant minority of cardiac arrest survivors across multiple countries and multiple studies report coherent experiences from a period of flatline. Not vague impressions, not dreams. Structured, sequential, emotionally vivid experiences that they can describe in detail afterward, some of which include accurate information about events in the room that they could not have perceived through normal means. The largest prospective study of this, published by cardiologist Pim van Lommel in The Lancet in 2001, followed 344 cardiac arrest survivors. 62 of them, which is 18%, reported near death experiences. A subset described perceptions from outside their own bodies that were subsequently verified. The scientific debate around what exactly this means is ongoing and genuinely unsettled. The honest answer is we don't know. We have data that doesn't fit the current model, and the current model hasn't been revised to accommodate it. What it does establish firmly is that the relationship between brain activity and conscious experience is not a simple on off equation. Something is happening at the margins that existing frameworks don't clearly explain. So, where does this all leave us? A coma, at its most accurate, is a disruption to the brain's ability to express and coordinate consciousness, not necessarily its ability to generate it. The absence of a response is not the same as the absence of experience, and the systems that produce awareness, that produce the felt sense of being here and present, appear to be more resilient, more distributed, and more persistent than we assumed. This has changed how the best hospitals now approach comatose patients. Active communication, structured sensory stimulation, brain imaging protocols. The behavioral assessment that defined the field for 50 years is increasingly understood as a first step, not a final answer. For patients and families, the practical implications are real. How you talk in that room, what you say, whether you assume someone is there, these are no longer just matters of comfort. They're informed by science. But here's the thing I want to leave you sitting with. The story of coma research is, on its surface, about neurological states and diagnostic categories and imagining technology. But underneath it, it's about something more fundamental: what we're willing to count as consciousness and who gets to decide. For decades, the working assumption was that if a person couldn't show us awareness, they didn't have it. The inner life had to prove itself through external behavior. And that assumption, quiet, unexamined, embedded in the structure of medical classification, meant that some unknown number of people spent years or decades correctly classified on paper and completely misrepresented in practice. The brain scanner didn't just find conscious patients in vegetative bodies. The brain scanner didn't just find conscious patients in vegetative bodies. It revealed an assumption we didn't know we were making, which raises a question that extends far beyond hospitals. How much of what we know about other minds, other people's inner experience, their awareness, their presence, is actually something we've confirmed versus something we've assumed because behavior matched what we expected? Consciousness, it turns out, doesn't always come with proof. Sometimes it's just there in the dark, waiting for someone to think, to ask.